With watches, complications add an extra element, and sometimes they are great additions to pieces, especially watches that exhibit finer examples of the craft. The higher complication watches are a marvel, without question, and the simplest, the more common watch complications begins with the date. That small window in the corner of the dial that often is mismatched to the actual dial color. Many times before I have mentioned that contrast and the proportion of these windows is the reason why they put me off date complications. But today we're going to go deeper into the psychology, and I hope to bring forward a reason why you should hate the date complication on your watch. How do we view watches? What are they? A few decades ago they were considered tools, but today what constitutes them? They are anachronisms in the purest sense. Everything we would need to know about our day can be found on our phones, so why do we wear watches then? Good question. Wearing watches is a form of appreciation of the past, and adding to that, I view them as a form of escapism. Small pieces of creative art that we wear and admire. In a way, we see them less as things that simply tell the time, and more as examples of what mankind has created, harnessing such a powerful constant and translating it simply, like a mechanical sculpture on your wrist. And if you would like to see a brief history of mechanical timekeeping that I made a few months ago, I will link the video in the corner for you now. So hypothetically, you're going out for dinner, put on a dress watch, going to the beach, put on a diver, going to the gym, throw on a sports watch. These sorts of activities make wearing watches enjoyable. They accompany us during these moments of escapism as well. So when do you check the date on your watch normally? When does that aspect factor in? Think about it for a second. Maybe when you're signing the foot of a letter, a document or a statement. Maybe when you check into an appointment. Maybe when you're on the phone arranging a future meeting. I hope you see where I'm going with this. The date on the watch to me feels like a disconnect, a psychological disconnect, or more as something that brings you away from that escapism and back to something a bit more real, something a bit more grounded. Is this bad for everyone? Of course not. You shouldn't take this seriously if you enjoy date complications on your watches. Of course they are practical for everyday use. But with this restraint gone, you would feel different. I for one feel less stressed not seeing the date on the watch, not knowing that the month is beginning or ending. And this might sound a bit too 60s, but it keeps me in the moment instead of thinking days ahead, which is what we often do in our lives. Looking at their design details, what are the impracticalities of a date complication? As already mentioned, they can throw off the balance of the watch. Their placement can ruin the layout on the dial, and most of us can't even read them at a glance without glasses or adjusting our wrists to look at them closer. There have also been innovations to help us read the dates, like the iconic Cyclops lens on the Rolex pieces. Even though, design-wise, the original Cyclops lens introduction was more of an afterthought, and not a design fully realized. Contrasting that, Panerai produced a more refined Cyclops lens that was set inside the crystal. Regardless, these magnifiers break up the symmetry of the watch, no matter where you look at them. But there have been great improvements made with date complications as well. Omega is probably one of the easiest examples to look at. Not only have they managed to match the date wheel with the dial color, but they have also centered the dates on the dial, making them look all the more integrated. And then if we turn our heads to Glashütte, the higher tier of Ilunga and Zone pieces, like their Saxonias and Ilunga 1, they perfectly express the intention behind date window integration with their pieces. The dial was not cut as an afterthought for these watches, and the combination of imbalance makes the watches all the more eye-opening. Another element to factor in is that the date complication is more technical than a typical three-hander movement. So the complication makes the watch's servicing cost increase slightly, but that isn't really relevant. So there is a split, and here are the points that I would like to hammer home and hope to get you thinking. On one side, many date complications have been lazily implemented into watches. The convention of placing the date at the 3 o'clock position has become the norm. This often throws off the balance of the watch, but there are other rare exceptions that truly have thought about how to improve their layout. Then we have the thought process behind whether the date is truly integral for the watch that we wear as a form of escapism. On one hand, we can appreciate the complication as being something technical and impressive, but the big question is, without knowing the date, would it help improve our wearing experience of the watch? I, for one, have never enjoyed date complications on watches. If an option was presented to me, I would always choose one without a date. From a cleanliness standpoint, nothing beats a simple dial. But also the thought of knowing that a simple press of the home button on my smartphone can tell me everything that I would need to know about my day if the moment called for it, lets me divide technology away from a different form of artistry. mechanical artistry, where time alone by itself is precious.